Hello and welcome to my CodeRage session about mobile applications with database. My name is Fernando Rizzato. I am a software consultant from Embarcadero, working for Latam in Brazil. This is our agenda for today. The idea is to understand better what is the difference between IBLite, IB2Go, and InterBase server. Also, we are going to explore the options we have for mobile database embed inside your application like SQLite, IBLite, and IB2Go. Also, configurations and common problems that normally will happen when you start building your first applications with database, and also a comparison between InterBase and the SQLite. Of course, some demos and additional resources. So, IBLite, IB2Go, and InterBase server. Start by the most common used edition of the InterBase server. InterBase server is a full database system with all the hazards you can find in any other database system. It's very easy to configure, to install, and does not require a DBA or too much configuration. It's very easy to set up and to maintain. InterBase server is available for Linux and for Windows on 32 and 64-bit versions. Then we have IBLite and IB2Go. And in fact, IBLite and IB2Go share the exactly same binaries. They are exactly the same database. But IBLite has some restrictions and is for free. So IBLite, the free edition of our embedded database, has some restrictions like the database size limitation, where to go there's no limitation. Also, support for change views is only available for to go, and some other details. Security encryption also is only available for to go. But it's important to understand the IBLite and IB2Go are exactly the same database, the same engine, the same binaries. The database is, or let's say the database file, the metadata, it's the same if you are running on server, on to go, or IBLite. The only thing, when you want to pass from IBLite to IB2Go, you just need to add a license, and then you have the additional resources available for your application. But you don't need to change one line in your application. It's exactly the same binaries, the same way to work. The only difference is the free version has some limitations, as you can see here. And this table is also available here in this link. So if you want to look for more details and each of these items here, you can go to our DocWeek and everything is available there. Okay, so that's why I put the link here. Let's talk a little bit more about the option you have for mobile applications. So SQLite, it's an embedded database with no external dependency. So you just need to copy the SQLite data binaries inside your application, and you are ready to go. It's serverless. That means there's no a server version, or there is no a server or a service available for SQLite, and it does not require a lot of configurations. It's basically zero configuration and no installation. Has support for transaction, and of course follows the ECID standards. Is developed by the SQLite Consortium. Here you have the links if you want to explore more. And I'm putting here a tutorial about how to start working with SQLite. So this is about SQLite. It's one of the options we have for embedded database for iOS, for Android, or including Windows and Mac. So then we have IBLite and IB2Go. Also, they are embedded database. They have no external dependence. They are serverless, but InterBase has an option, has an edition with a server version with high performance. And if you need to move from the Lite or to go to the server edition, you just need to copy your database. There's no difference inside in terms of the database or metadata. Okay. Also requires zero configuration when we are talking about, in this case, IBLite IB2Go. Has full support for transactions and everything that a database needs, including on mobile. That means it's a full database system, include even on mobile. You have transactions, you have security, you have users, password, things that you don't have on SQLite. It's available for Windows, Android, iOS, and the Mac. Also, Linux and Solaris when talking about the server edition. IBLite Ready to Go is created by Embarcadero. Here you have the link if you want to explore more about the product. And here a tutorial about using InterBase in general, how to start, SQL syntax, configurations, and etc. Okay, so this is about IBLite and Ready to Go. Some more details. What is the difference are between IBLite and Ready to Go? So as you can see here, the free version of our embedded database has some limitations. I want to focus especially on the most important ones, like the security. So if you need security for your data, there's no options. There's no option. InterBase to go is the way, because SQLite is basically a text file with some more powers, but it's basic. You can say it's a text file. So InterBase or IBLite has at least a user and the password even on the Lite edition. But to go edition adds really strong encryption system, so you can have all of your data under a huge and a good encryption and secured encryption system. Also, there's no size limitation when we go to the to-go edition, and there is, of course, a size limitation. Even for mobile, 100 megabytes should be enough for the most part of the application. But if you need more, you can move to directly right to the to-go edition. Also, change views, a very important resource from InterBase, is not available for the Lite edition, only to-go and server edition. Change views allows you to keep track of the change of your database automatically with no triggers or any other resource. It's automatic. So I recommend you to explore more these resources. Okay, some configurations and the common problems you can have when you start with deploying a mobile database application. So when we are developing in a desktop, of course you have the database active, you have a service like InterBase server or any other database, and you are directly talking with the server side of the database, and you create your application like in Delphi or C++ Builder. You have the benefit of having data in design time. But when you go to embed database, you need to consider some difference between the distinct operating system you are deploying. So let's use this just as a sample, but there are many other options we are going to test after during our demos. So when you point your application to a database, you are of course defining a path. So if you are in Windows, you are going to use a common path in Windows, like C, documents and settings or something like that. But when you go to mobile systems, especially iOS and Android, you have specific folders or places where you can put your database. Normally, there are folders inside the package of your application. So we have some classes or some functions in our RTL that helps you to automatically configure, also the deploy manager, to configure exactly where the database should be. So looking for iOS and Android, there are some standards you are going to understand, but the most important thing here is to understand that you should always use functions like get document path to determine where the database will be located. So when you use this function on Windows, we will have a result like this one, depending on the version of your Windows you are. There are some constants from the operating system that determines where or which is the result from this call. When you are on iOS or Android, there are also specific places where to put your database. So you can find more about these functions and the other functions that are important on these links. But for now, just understand you need to take care about the location of your database file when deploying the application, especially for mobile um, platforms. Some problems that you can find, um, especially when you work with InterBase, and it's important to understand InterBase or a IBLite also requires a license. It's free, but you need to identify the license you are using. So if you don't put a license, even when using IBLite, you are going to receive a message like this: InterBase is not licensed. Also, if you define a wrong path to your database, you can see messages like that, this one or this one. You need to make sure you are using the correct drivers, you are using IBLite driver or SQLite driver, and you are pointing your path to the right place where you are deploying your database. Okay, so this is just a sample about the support files you need to add in your application too. This is the engine of InterBase that you need to add in your application to deploy before deploy to a mobile, especially for mobile platforms. Okay, here we have a comparison between InterBase and SQLite in general. InterBase in general, not only in IBLite, but InterBase in all editions has full support for store procedures, while SQLite has not. Also, InterBase has support for users and table permissions, so users, logins, passwords, etc. SQLite has no support at all. Uh, InterBase in the server version has support for simultaneous access with no limitations, and this is something restricted in the SQLite. Um, Online backups, encryption, there's no security at all on SQLite. There are some third-party components, but are um, libraries, but not native. Also, a lot of data types to choose, where SQLite only supports some few data types. Real support for parallelism for carry execution in parallel. Also, support for domains, SQL cursors that are not available in SQLite. So, as you can see, there are a huge difference between SQLite and InterBase, even when on mobile. InterBase on mobile has all the features from the server edition. So it's really a database on your mobile application and not a text file. Okay, so now let's do some demos and understand how to create a multi-device application with a database embedded using Delphi. So for this session, I'm going to use Delphi, and let's start by creating a multi-device application. Of course, everything we are going to see here is the same for FireMonkey or BCL. Okay, so let's start by boot device application using the break template. I bring here toolbar, and inside this toolbar we are going to have a button, also a list view. This list view will be aligned to the client, and this button has text open. So this is basically what we need in terms of the design of your application. Let's add the database side. First of all, let's put here find that connection, okay, and a carry. So find that carry. Let's configure here the connection editor. I'm going to use the IBLite driver, not the standard InterBase Lite, but the IBLite driver. Okay, and basically we need to point here to a database. I have here some files that will be included in the demos from this session. So let's start by the deep demos. We need to provide a username, and the password. This is the standard username and the password from InterBase. So in this case, I'm connecting to a local database that is running on my desktop. So I have here a developer, InterBase developer installed. It's the same binary from the InterBase server, but with, of course, some connections and sessions limitations. So this is the developer edition that's part of your installation of Delphi or C++. And I'm using in design time the desktop version or the developer edition of InterBase to create my application. And then we need to change the paths when we are going to deploy the application. So we have the connection done. Let's put here some carry, like status from customers. Oops, it's customer. Here we are. So we have data. Okay. I'm going to turn here this. Let's make this, keep this disconnect and without a login prompt. So we have basically a carry with some fields. Let's add here the fields. And let's configure now our list view. So it appears, I'm going to make this list item with a bright detail, and the bind visually, we can, using our bind visually, we can connect the fields to the list view. So let's put here the company in the item text and the font on the detail. If we open our carry here, we can see data in design time because we are using the desktop or developer edition of InterBase locally to develop our application. We need to add here also the physical InterBase driver. So here you have, and a cursor from FireDuck that will help you creating a cursor in each of our supported platforms. So these are all the components we need. Our application is basically done. We need just to add some code. The first thing is, let's open the query manual, adding here carry one, open. Okay, and let's make sure this is closed. And also, so let me save this here. IBLite Okay, and if you just run the application like the connection is configured right now on Windows or on Windows 32 or 64-bit, you're going to see, let me put here, release, run. And the data we are going to see is, in this case, connected to or being provided by the server edition or developer edition of InterBase, not the IBLite. Okay, so let's change the application to use now the embedded version of InterBase. Let's first doing a deploy to Mac and then iOS and Android, and then IBLite on Windows also. So first thing you need to take care is to add the database to your application. You can do this just clicking here, add, and let's find our database here. Dividimos. Okay. When you add a database in your application, our IDE automatically understands you are going to deploy a database embedded in your application, and it asks you about what file support you need. So I'm going to add here IB2Go. Why InterBase to go if I'm going to use IBLite? Well, as we saw in the previous slides, IB2Go and IBLite have exactly the same binary. If you add to go license, this will be to go. If you don't add, if you add a light license, IBLite license, this is going to use IBLite features. So here I'm provisioning the application with all the binaries we need to deploy in all support platforms. As you can see here, we have, let's say for Android, we have reg IB2Go and reg IBLite. These files rest the license, and then we are going to discuss this a little bit after. So for now, we have the support files added to our application. So if we go to project, let me save the application, and then let me change here to, let's say, Android. So if you go to project deployment, you have here all the support files from InterBase, including the license, and we are going to explore this a little bit more after. And you have also the database, the DBDemos database, pointing to, so here's the source, and then the remote path where the database we are going to be deployed. You have here, in the case of Android, assets internal. Assets internal in the Android world is like your documents on Windows. So this is the place where you can put a file that can be changed, that is not a file that's not a read-only file. So by default, assets internal is the file where your database is going to be deployed on Android. If we turn here to iOS 64-bit, project, deployment, you have all the stuff to deploy the iOS application, and here you have the database. And here in this case of iOS, the remote path is startup documents. This is the documents from this application, this package, this app on iOS. Okay, so let's work for now with these two platforms, iOS and Android. If we go out, well, let's select here Mac, and then also project deployment. Of course, you can choose here also the configuration, the deployment configuration by this selector. Okay, there is no problem, but I prefer this way just to make clear what we are doing. So for Mac, you have also the DBDemos, DDB, and point for a different place, that is content hash source startup. This is the root path from Mac, as the inside your user in this case. So if you go here to my Mac, if you deploy the database exactly to this path, your database file is going to be generated here inside your user in the root, okay, of your user. But you can add any other folder here. Let's say I want to send my database to the documents folder, not to the root. So I add here documents. Okay, let's save. So we have the configuration, the deployment configuration already done for Mac, iOS, and Android. Let's work with these three platforms right now, and then we can add Windows because there is a trick for Windows. Before deploying, we need to change the path. So you saw the paths are different in between in each of our support platforms. So in the connection component, we have before connect event. And here we are going to add some code. Basically, what we need to do is to redefine the path where your database are going to be located. So for that connection one, parents, values, database, and we are going to use support class from our RTL. So I'm going to put here use system.io utils. So we have tpath is a helper class with Get documents path. Get documents path will bring to you the documents path in each of our support platforms automatically. You don't need to test your code if you are going to deploy to Mac or to iOS or to Android. So if you are going to deploy to any of platforms different from Windows, this will be there enough. So documents path plus path delim is the path delimiter. This is also automatic, independent of the platform. And then the database name, if I recall here correctly, it's db demos gdb. So db demos gdb. Okay, so this is all you need to set up your application to deploy to the mobile, especially for the mobile platforms. So let's start by deploying to Mac. I have here, I started here PSA server. The PA server is service or utility that allows RAD, Delphi, or C++ to deploy to multiple platforms automatically. So PA server started here. Is asking for permission for entering debug mode. So the ID is connected to the PA server. You can test here. Okay. So let's deploy to Mac. Run. And in a few seconds, we'll have the application compiled and running on Mac. I can click here, open, and you have data on Mac with IBLite. In this case, we are clearly using the IBLite. Looking here, let me explore here a little bit. In PS server directory, you have a copy of your application. In this case, it's project 1. But you have also a support directory here, a folder for InterBase, and also the license. And in documents, we have here the database. Okay, so this is the application running with IBLite on Mac. Let's deploy now the same application without changing in one line of the code to Android. So Android, target. Here I have Moto D running Android 6, and I will compile this application and deploy now for Android. While the compilation happens, let me open here the reflector so I can share the device screen with you. So here we have reflector. This is reflector 2. I'm going to cast my screen. Here we are. Okay, so let's organize this a little bit better. Here you have an Android device, and I will share the same on iOS. And I will click open. You have data on Android. The same application with the same code, just one line of code to determine where the database is located. Let's do the same for iOS now. So I just make a small correction here because I forgot to put this on sender. I will remove here this Android device and connect my iPad. So here we have connect to Mac. And let's choose here the target. So my target now is my iPads running iOS 10. Okay, just select the iPad and click on Run. I will also share here the iPad screen. here you have. So here is the iPad screen, and in a few seconds you are going to see here you have open, and you have data also on iOS. So same application, same database deployed to iOS, Android, and the Mac. Let's now understand how to do the same for Windows. So the trick here is very basically when deploying, as we are seeing in other platforms, when deploying an application with embedded database, you need to also deploy the support files. So if you just click on Run here, let me close my stop. I'm going to stop. I'm stopping my InterBase local server, and I will just select here 32, the Windows 32-bit platform, and click on Run. Doing that, the application will not work, of course, because we're still trying to use the database or the local InterBase server. You need to deploy also the support files with your application. So what you need here is to use also PA server on Windows. So I will start first here PA server. PA server is installed here on my local in this Windows 10. So Embarcadero PA server. PA server. No password, so PA server is available here, listening on this IP address. And I'm going to, let's select here 64-bit and add, point the profile to my local host that was previously configured here. So if you go here, Tools, Options, the Windows 10 profile pointed to localhost. That means we are going to deploy this application on Windows locally. Could be, of course, a remote PA server running on another machine or a server machine. So when you compile and run your application or deploy application using this profile here on the Windows platform, all the files that are listed here on the deployment will be sent to the remote path in accordance with the configuration of it directory here. So as you can see, the binary file and the GDB, the database, the InterBase database, are going to be created or sent to the same directory on the same place. It's different from the mobile platforms where you are going to put in a special folder like documents or things like that. You are going to send here the DBDEMS database to the same directory or same folder where the project, the binary, is going to be generated. So we just need to change here one line of the code to define the correct path for Windows. So let's do here using compile directive. Let's say if defined Windows, in this case we are going to configure here a path for only for Windows. If it's not Windows, we already have the correct path here. So let's just close this with endif. And in the case of Windows, we're going to have fd connection 1 params the params values, and then database. There is a function param str which returns to you param str, which returns to you the current execution path. So let's add here extract file path. So this will give us just the path where the executable is running, and For security, let's add here a function that will make sure we have the path delimit, because you can have a path with or without the path delimit. So include trailing path delimiter. So this is your path from Windows plus the db demos gdb. So this is the path for Windows, and here the path for other platforms. Okay, let's see if everything's okay. Yeah. Let's run now the application. So as a result, you have here now the application loaded. Let's open the database, and you have data. In this case, using IBLite. If you look here, we have the InterBase service is done. Look to the directories. The directories here. Let's see what's happening if we go to PA server directory, extract here. We have here our project 1. So the InterBase stuff is here, including the license and all the binaries, the database engine itself embedded, and the GB demos GDB also in the same folder, so you can easily run the application and connect to the database, in this case using IBLite or IB2Go, doesn't matter. So this is what you need to properly deploy your IBLite or IB2Go application to all support platforms. I have some additional demos here. Let me open this project group just to show the same with SQLite. There are some other demos here, but it's basically the same with a better interface, so you can take a look when you download the samples. For SQLite, it's basically the same. You have here the database integrated to the project. Let's first run on Mac. So project deployment, you have the same configurations for SQLite, and the database is going to documents, as you can see here. So I run this sample. In this case, it's SQLite, not InterBase Lite, and we have data with SQLite running on Mac. You have the same using a profile here. I'm going to deploy the same application on Windows, so you have data also with SQLite on Windows, and the same will be available for Android and the iOS. If we go to the code very quickly here, basically the same code. Point the database when in Windows or when in other platforms like Mac, iOS, and Android. So with this, we have covered the basics when deploying an embedded database with your application for iOS, Android, Mac, and Windows using IBLite, IB2Go, and SQLite. Here you have some additional resources. Download if you need or want to try InterBase server. You have a full trial with no restrictions for 90 days. You have also free forever InterBase developer with no expirations. It's the same InterBase that is automatically installed with your Delphi or C++, but if you need to reinstall or you have any problem, you can download it here and install. You are going to receive a key on your email. And when talk about IBLite and IB2Go, so IBLite and IB2Go is already part of your Delphi and C++ builder installation. You don't need to do anything to use this database. You don't need to download this database. If we go here to my desktop, you have here normally inside the public documents, you have the redistribution files from InterBase, from the embedded version of InterBase. So we have here the stuff for Android, like you can see, also the InterBase features or resources you have for iOS, Windows. So everything is inside this directory. And as you can see here, we have the license. So the license, you are going to, when you receive your Delphi and C++ license, you have a serial number to generate your IBLite and the IB2Go test license directly here on this address. So on this address, you have all the instructions to generate your IBLite and IB2Go registration files based on serial number you receive with your Delphi and C++ license. Okay, and here you have all the documentation regarding the features you saw today. Also some blogs where you can explore more about InterBase, IBLite, and IB2Go. So here you have my contact details once more. Thank you for your time, and let's now live with the Q&A session. Thank you.